Good morning, everybody. It's 10:32, so I suggest that we start this webinar that is jointly organized by EMSA and DG Move, and it will be dealing with the FuelEU Maritime Regulations, the compliance and the reporting aspects. Welcome to the event, and thank you for joining us and being together with us for the next hour and a half. I share my screen for some slides. First of all, just to make some housekeeping announcements. There are a lot of people in this call, so we need to be sure about the way we are handling questions and comments, so they can be submitted only through the chat. We will make sure that some of the questions are answered during this webinar, but I mean, seeing previous occasions, our experience is that we are getting a great number of questions. So not all of them will be dealt during the webinar, but will be answering these later on. The webinar will be also recorded, and the recordings will be shared on the website of EMSA. And all the presentations that you will be seeing today, they will be also put on the website of EMSA. So just to say a little bit about the webinar itself, it forms part of a series of events. This is the third webinar that we are organizing for all stakeholders for whom the FuelEU Maritime Regulation is relevant. We had our first webinar on the 1st of June. That was a general introduction for preparations for the FuelEU regulation. And then we had a second webinar that was on the 23rd of July. That was dealing with monitoring plans. We were giving you instructions about the filling out and also of the uploading of monitoring plans to the FuelEU database. And now this is our third webinar, where we'll give you more details about reporting and calculations, about different functionalities under the THETIS-MRV, and also the compliance balance module. So on the slide, you can see the agenda for today. There will be 4 specific presentations. 3 of them are done by EMSA colleagues and 1 short one by myself. First, Mattia will talk about the reporting and calculations that need to be done under the FuelEU. Then Caroline will talk about the THETIS-MRV and the new model for the FuelEU report that can be found there. Then I will talk about compliance obligations following a transfer of a company, where we received a lot of questions. And then Mattia will again address the THETIS-MRV and the model there for compliance balance and also for the flexibility mechanisms. And we hope to close this webinar around 12 o'clock, so in 1.5 hours time. Okay, but before we get down to the real practical presentations, I will just give you a very few overview of what has been happening since the summer on the overall preparations for the implementation of the regulation. As you know that FuelEU will apply fully from the 1st of January 2025, so it's about a 1 month's time, but the submission of the monitoring plans that already started from early August on. And just to show you a slide where we see a fairly good level of submissions from shipping companies, from operators. This is already a bit outdated. That reflects the situation in October. Since then, we see a slight increase in the numbers. So we see a good registrations or claiming of ships for FuelEU compliance Our estimate that there's around 14,000 ships that needs to be registered, and 60 or by now even 70% of them did this registration. And monitoring plans are also coming in a relatively good speed. We have by now around 50% of the companies that submitted their monitoring plans, and these monitoring plans, they started to be verified by verifiers. So monitoring plans are already being handled, and then from January there will be the obligation to record data on EU-related voyages by the operators, and the submission of the first FuelEU report will have to happen by the 31st of January 2026, and then the verification period will be starting. We've been also working in the Commission on related secondary acts. 3 of these acts have been adopted and published. They all relate to the governance aspects of the regulation. One on the verification activities, one on monitoring plans, and one on the accreditation of verifiers. So these secondary acts, they made it possible that we can start verifying the monitoring plans that were submitted that I told you about a minute ago. But there are 4 further secondary acts in the pipeline. One of them is dealing with the communication on OPS. So when a ship wants to use OPS in a port, we need to lay down some rules for the communication between the ship and the port. This is especially relevant from 2030, from which point on the FuelEU regulation obliges ships to use OPS in selected ports. So we lay down rules for this communication process. This act will be published for public feedback in January, and the date of publication will come in February or in March as latest after translations, and it will make it to the official journal of the European Union. Then we are working on another implementing act that will be on the FuelEU database. This will go for public feedback in December and publication again February or January. I would say that this act is not really relevant for operators. It more gives kind of a legal basis, a legal background for the operation of the database. But the functionalities of the database, they are opened, those that are relevant, and others will be opened gradually. So I think operators will not need this implementing act for working in the FuelEU database. Third one is on the criteria for the acceptance of zero emission technologies. As you know, when a ship in port, they can either use OPS or zero emission technologies. That comes in the obligation comes in force from 2030, but actually even before that, ships can use Z and OPS in ports, and this will help their this will reduce their and the intensity, the greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used. So the implementing act that will be setting the criteria for the use of such technologies will go for public feedback in January, and then again publication in a month or 2 months later. And finally, the fourth one that is probably the most relevant for the moment for operators is an act on neighboring transshipment container ports. As you know, the regulation has this provision which says that in neighboring container transshipment ports, a stop by a vessel will not be counted as a port of call. And this is actually the purpose of this provision, to reduce the chances and opportunities for evasive measures, so that companies are using ports close to EU ports and transferring activities there. So they are reducing the part of the voyage that is falling under the FuelEU. The ETS has a very similar instrument, and they already published an implementing act a year ago. When we put together our list of such ports, we used the data and the analysis that was done for the ETS for the outcome. So the list of the ports for FuelEU and ETS will be in a very strong likelihood exactly the same ports. But a public feedback on this implementing act will be launched in December, and it will be published in the first quarter of 2025. So this is about the secondary acts that are being prepared. Then a few words about the actions that EMSA and MOVE are doing to support compliance. We published, DG MOVE published a Q&A document with around 50 questions and answers, but we are working on a second batch, which should be online in January. We selected the questions that are most commonly we are receiving, and we will publish this on our website in December, the second batch, but the first batch is already there. Then we have a help desk where we are trying to answer all your questions at the earliest possible date. The webinars that already took place in over the summer that I told you about at the beginning, the recordings and slides from these webinars, they are published on the EMSA website, so you can watch and listen back to them. And also we are working on a guidance document that is to be published in the second quarter of 2025. This will be very much a guidance document that is already being issued for ETS Maritime, but I would say that if you are looking at the ETS Maritime guidance document on DG Klima's website, you're getting a lot of useful information about the implementation of the FuelEU regulation as well. I also want to say quickly that we are working with stakeholders under the European Sustainable Shipping Forum. I think many associations, NGOs, and shipping companies are there. This is a restricted group of people. We can accept people in this group only through a call for expression of interest. So under the ESSF subs, we are launching 3 work streams that will be addressing issues that are highly relevant for the immediate implementation of the FuelEU. One work stream that started already working on will be dealing with calculations, how to do the calculations under the FuelEU, and the results of this work stream in the format of the report will be shared with a wider audience, with everybody. The second work stream that started is on fuel certification, how to deal with the issue of certifying fuels for the purpose of compliance with the FuelEU regulation. And the third one that will be launched, I think in January, we hope, is on onshore power supply. And later on in the first quarter or half of 2025, 3 more work streams will be starting. These are more relating to the review of the FuelEU regulation. They will deal with carbon capture and storage. They will deal with black carbon, and also updating the emission default factors under Annex 2 of the FuelEU. So on the report, on the results of all these work streams, we will be reporting to everybody once the report is being finalized. Just wanted to flag to you a few key issues of concerns that where we receive a lot of questions, a lot of inquiries, and where we are internally working in DG MOVE and also in EMSA. One big key concern is, of course, the availability and the price of alternative fuels. We see that this is a basic enabler for the success of the FuelEU Maritime Regulation, and we try to develop a strategic approach here in the European Commission, how we can boost the supply. So here we talk about funding and financing opportunities for promoting and facilitating the supply of alternative fuels. We already have some existing instruments like the EU Innovation Fund under Horizon Europe. We are providing funding for developing, for research and development activities. But also the new commission has announced that it will be working on what we call is a sustainable transport investment plan, so-called STIP, which will be specifically targeting how we can facilitate the supply of maritime fuels and also aviation fuels. So the details of this plan will be coming out in the next few months. Related to fuel supply, of course, fuel certification is absolutely crucial. So with the Commission and EMSA, we started working on the rules for fuel certification. Our plans is that the certification for FuelEU has to be happening through the Union database for biofuels that started operating in the last few months. It is not ready for maritime. So in 2025, there will be some interim solutions with the submission of papers, proof of sustainability, of proof of compliance papers, and from 2026, we will move fully, entirely to an IT version of the Union database for biofuels. We are also working on the Renewable and Low Carbon Fuels Alliance, where fuel suppliers and fuel users are brought together, and they started some project pipelines on projects for improving the supply of alternative fuels. And finally, just to mention the pooling mechanisms, where we see a lot of interest, a lot of questions. It seems that many operators would like to use pooling for the purpose of complying with the regulation for the initial few years. And later on today, we will be telling you a little bit more about how pooling can happen and how its registration in the FuelEU database will be taking place. So that's a kind of an introduction from my side about the overall developments in the last few months. And now I give the floor to my colleague from EMSA, who will be in the first presentation. It will be talking about, Mattia will be talking about reporting and calculations under the FuelEU. So Mattia, over to you.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Peter, for the introduction. I will share my screen for my presentation. I think now that you could see the screen.
Yes, it's good.
Okay, perfect. So my presentation, during my presentation, I will present the state of play for the reporting and compliance options under the FuelEU Maritime Regulation. This is the agenda for today. First, we will go through the allocation of the energy in the FuelEU report by the ASM companies. Then we will see the calculation of the greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used on board the ships, and the calculation, of course, even of the compliance balance for the reporting period, and the compliance options for the ships to be compliant in the event of deficit in the compliance balance, or in any case to join a pool. And then in the end, some calculation examples that in any case are being discussed during the ECCF Workstream 1, where will be new examples to be delivered by the Workstream 1 group. So once we have the energy in scope, once we have the energy used on board the ship from the input data that are the MRV fuel consumption and the onshore power supply data, there are different steps to find the energy in scope under FuelEU Maritime Regulation. The first step is about the derogation of the energy used during the sailing in ice or due to the ice class with the deduction of this energy. Then there is the aggregation, the annual aggregation of the energy per geographic scope and per derogation as per the Article 2 of the FuelEU Maritime Regulation. And then there is the deduction of such energy under the Article 2, paragraph 3 to 6 of the FuelEU Maritime Regulation. And in the end, the last step is to deduct half of the energy for the international voyages outside the EU and for the outermost regions as per the Article 2.1 of the FuelEU Maritime Regulation. So for what concerns the ICE derogations, the Annex 4 of the FuelEU Maritime sets the calculation for the exclusion of the energy due to the ice class and due to the sailing in ice conditions, and the mass to be considered for the calculation of the compliance balance is the adjusted mass for the sailing in ice and for the ice classes, and these will apply for technical characteristics of the ship having an ice class such as AI and or super AI or equivalent classes, and or due to sailing in ice conditions, but this will apply until the 31st of December of 2034. So the annual allocations of fuel in the international voyages is shown here in the slide. After the aggregation of the energies, the company may allocate annually fuels to the scope of 50% of the energy under FuelEU Maritime. So it's possible for the companies to allocate annually the fuels, the biofuels under the scope of FuelEU Maritime Regulation. Here we have the calculation of the greenhouse gas intensity as per the formula defined in FuelEU Maritime Regulation. The first step is to calculate the wake to tank and the tank to wake emissions. Then the calculation of the same intensity for the RFNBO fuels that have a different reward multiplier. Actually, we are considering half of the energy because the reward factor in this case is 2. And then we apply for the wind reward factor that will depend on the wind assisted propulsion on board factor that this is a factor that is outside the formula, let's say, of the greenhouse gas intensity, but it's foreseen or it is possible in the future to involve even this type of energy directly inside the greenhouse gas intensity formula. This is the timeline for the compliance balance. So first of all, there is the calculation of the initial compliance balance of the reporting period, and then the calculation of the adjusted compliance balance of the reporting period, considering banking and borrowing. And this is done by the verifiers within the 31st of March of the verification period. Then within the 30th of April, it's possible for the companies to apply for a flexibility mechanism that includes pooling, banking, or borrowing. And then within the 30th of June of the verification period, there is the calculation of the final compliance balance, the verified compliance balance. And if it is negative, or if we have non-compliant port calls under the Article 6 of FuelEU Maritime about the onshore power supply data, there are penalties to be paid, calculated by the administering state, paid by the companies, and then the issuance of the document of compliance, or by the verifiers if no penalties occurred, or by the administering state if there were penalties to be paid. This is more extensively the formula for the compliance balance for the reporting period. As we see, we have a greenhouse gas intensity target that in the limits for the greenhouse gas intensity are increasing through the years up to the 80% reduction of the initial reference value, that is 91.16 gram of CO2 equivalent per megajoule. And this is then multiplied by the energy in scope of the FuelEU Maritime used on board the ship. The compliance balance of the energy used in the reporting period, here we are considering actually the initial compliance balance. So once we have the initial compliance balance, we can calculate the adjusted compliance balance, considering, as we said, the banked compliance surplus and the advanced compliance surplus. The banked compliance surplus can be from other different reporting periods, since this could be cumulative during all the reporting periods and it has not expirations. And the advanced compliance surplus instead comes from the borrowing from the previous reporting period. It could come only by the previous reporting period. So here we can see the different options after the calculation of the adjusted compliant balance. We find after, this is after the 31st of March, so after the first calculations of the verifiers, and we can find ourselves or in a surplus or in a deficit for the adjusted compliance balance. So since there are a lot of factors that could go behind the control of the companies, it is possible for them to apply for a flexibility mechanism and to be compliant in the end. This flexibility mechanism, as we said, comprehends the banking, pooling, and borrowing options, or the payment of a penalty if there is not a choice to apply for the flexibility mechanism. In the end, then there is the issuance of the document of compliance, or by the verifiers or by the administering state. So what is a borrowing? Borrowing actually is the possibility to borrow from the following verification period for the companies a certain amount called the advanced compliance surplus, that it could be maximum the 2% of the greenhouse gas intensity target for that year, multiplied by the energy used during the reporting period and under the scope of FuelEU Maritimes. In general, there are specific rules, and it is not possible to borrow for more than 2 consecutive periods. And then if the ship has no port calls in the following reporting period, the ship has to pay a penalty corresponding to the aggravated advanced compliance surplus. Actually, the aggravated advanced compliance surplus is the amount that should be given back in the following reporting period. So it is considered a 10% of aggravation of the amount that was borrowed during the verification period. The banking options foresees that during certain verification period, the ship has a certain banked surplus that then could be banked. The surplus could be banked by the companies and then used when the ship has a deficit. So the banked surplus doesn't have an expiration date. It could be accumulated during the years and then used whenever is appropriate for the ship. The pooling mechanism is a mechanism that foresees the use of overperformance of a ship to compensate the underperformance, under FuelEU Maritime, of course, of other ships. So it's possible to create pooling groups where ships can exchange their compliance balance surplus or deficits. There are preconditions. The most important precondition, let's say, is that the sum of the initial compliance balance of the ships included in the pool is positive, including even banking and borrowing. So then there are other preconditions that are for example, that the ship, of course, is in scope of FuelEU Maritime, that the ship hasn't borrowed compliance in the current verification period. The ship should not be included in another pool of compliance, so the pool of compliance for a ship is unique. And the ships in the pool must have a valid document of compliance if they were in scope of the FuelEU in the previous verification period. So there is a starter company, a unique starter company that identifies the ships even from other companies, and then identifies even the responsible companies for each of the ships. And this starter company proposes an allocation of the total compliance balance of the pool to each individual ship. Then the companies, the responsible companies, have to accept or reject the allocation, the proposal from the starter company. And then this starter company has to identify a unique verifier that could be even different from the ones that calculated the adjusted compliance balance for the different companies included in this pool. So this unique verifier, that again could be different, has to verify and assess the pool and then verify the allocation of the starter company. There are rules for the pooling allocations, and the rules are that the ships that had a compliance deficit before the pooling may not have a higher compliance deficit after the allocation, and the ships with the compliance surplus may not have a deficit after the allocation. This is the timeline, as we said, for the pooling. So there is first the submission of the verification of the verifier A of the FuelEU report submitted by the companies, then the calculation within the 31st of March of the verification period of the adjusted compliance surplus, then the companies may join the pool, and then there is the allocation of the compliance. Then the verifier that could not be the verifier A could be a different verifier, but this verifier is unique for the pool, and this is chosen by the starter company, do the verification for the pooling, and then after this there could be the banking if there is a surplus after the pool allocation, and then the issuance of the document of compliance if there is no deficit. These are the rounding rules that are under discussion of for the MRV and the ETS regulation, and these rounding rules are being discussed also in the ECCF Workstream 1. These will be updated also for the FuelEU Maritime Regulations, but still there are discussions about the rounding rules. So this is, let's say, what is coming up with the ETS and MRV regulation, and the FuelEU Maritime will be aligned to this. These are, again, other calculations, examples for the compliance of the ships. There will be, again, in the ECCF Workstream 1, other examples, other calculations for the compliance of the ships, but we can provide here some initial examples for the compliance of the ship. And this is all by my side, so I will now give the floor to my colleague Caroline, that is here with me, for her presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you hear me well. Yes.
Yes, we do. It's good.
Okay, thank you. So good morning. So picking the presentation from Mattia, I will talk a little bit about the enhancements made on the THETIS-MRV system for fuel regulation. So we have been building our system. Just, yes. So we have been building our system based on the fuel regulation and implementing acts that are now enforced, namely the verification procedures and the monitoring and recording per voyage on the Article 15. As already said in the other webinars, the base of the system, you will have a common branch, the common monitoring at the ship page, that will allow to the reporting only once principle, and for that the relief of burden of duplicate reporting. So we have tried to develop everything in this unique branch. So for the companies, even though the companies are different and the legislation is different, some of the reporting can be reused. As a sitemap, I'm showing you a sitemap so you can see how this system is being built. So for 2025, we have some enhancement to do under the MRV ETS regulation. But then we had the fuel monitoring plan that was put in place since August, deployed. Then we will have in 2025 the first module for fuel report that will enable to companies to report and prepare the partial fuel report. And then we will develop everything that has to be done for the compliance balance, as Mattia was explaining, the calculations and the different users. Also, I wanted to show you, Peter already showed, we had a lot of companies, ships registered under the FuelEU scope. Monitoring plans were created, some were submitted. So what I would like to enhance the fact that 92% of these monitoring plans that were submitted were cloned from the MRV monitoring plans. So the tool that we developed in the system was important in terms of releasing the burden of reporting again all the values. Also wanted to stress the fact that we have implemented the interim solution for verifiers since the pending accreditation, they are in the pending status accreditation in this moment. We have enabled the system that the verifiers can submit back to the companies the monitoring plans. And so as soon as the first verifier, the fuel verifier will have his accreditation, we will come back to the previous rules, meaning the verifiers will have to, the monitoring plans will be submitted to verifiers, and the verifier will be able or to take it back to the companies or to assess. But by the moment was an interim solution, so companies and verifiers can work around in the system. Also wanted to freeze in the next slides the different options we have. So we have the possibility to be under the scope of fuel and MRV. Then we can create the MRV monitoring plan, the fuel monitoring plan. You will have the possibility to create the fuel report. Also to add or remove ships from your fleet. The table will also display the status of the monitoring plans, the status of the report, the verifiers from under each scope, and the companies under each scope for each ship. So we had some enhancement to prepare the fuel report module. In the ship page, you will see that the voyage emissions records have some changes. For example, the mandatory LCV field, also the new fields about the bunker delivery notes or the proof of sustainability will be able to be filled. And so there's a little enhancements so you can also comply with the fuel regulation. Also for the differentiating criteria, remembering that differentiating criteria are different under the two scopes, the two regulations. So you will be able under the fuel report, under the fuel scope in the THETIS-MRV system to choose which of the differentiating criteria are in the legal scope, in the legal framework of the fuel regulation. Also in the voyage emission sailing in ice, the possibility to change when there is a changing of company, a sailing in ice, or a changing of the reporting period, you will be able to exactly put the position of the ship, the location, and also to choose for this derogation if you're in a regular navigation through ice or at anchorage. For the port emissions, we have a new tab for substitute sources of energy or zero emissions technology. It will depend, so this is for the port calls. You will have the possibility to fulfill all the amount of energy that was used. And also in the last column, it is possible to see if you have a differentiating criteria that was applied. Then you will have the totals for the annual emissions. So a tab for the wind factor, reward, you will have the parameter to calculate the derogations. Then another table that will show you, it's an auxiliary calculation to determine the 50% of energy with the lowest gas intensity. So it will show which of the gases are being applied in the calculations. And it will be, for example, in this case, it was in the first box, blue box, you have the application of Article 2.1c that has to do with the outermost region derogation. And in the the bottom box, blue box, was, for example, with no derogation, but sailing in through ice, for example. So these are examples just to show how the system will display the information that is fulfilled in the system. And then a last, let's say, total table that comprises all the information that was put in the system. You will see that there is a separate rows for OPS, SSE, and Z, because the regulation requires the segregation of this amount of energy per type of energy source. So this was for the reporting in the ship page. Now going to the module of the fuel report that you will be able to start to create in 2025. This module follows a workflow. And this workflow is similar to what you know under the ETS-MRV. So there's a draft, you create a draft fuel report, you can submit it to the verifier will or not assess it, give it back to the company, and the company corrects or deletes or creates a new one. So the workflow is similar. You will be able to see in the an overview of the fuel report will be able to be created under the reports. So we changed some of the names of the button to be able to have both regulatory frameworks. So under report, you will be able to create the fuel report. Some tabs will display, so the ship particulars, the report particulars are there, the ship and company, and verify information also, the fuel consumer is the same. For example, for the annual monitoring, new tabs will appear, as you can see. For the tab voyages, a compilation of all the information that was reported under the ship page will be compiled here in this table. Then you will have the port calls, and with the information that was also reported, and then you will have the emissions factor. Just to let you know that you will be able also in the ship page to accept the emissions factor as the defect value or defined by the user. This table is also very similar to what you know under the MRV ETS scope. So we try to harmonize as much as possible. As for the annual energy, this is again an example, the information that is gathered in the reporting tables backwards. And the idea here is that you are able to see which emission factors are being considered, which gas intensity is considered as the lowest, and to have per reporting and per voyage and per protocol all the emissions that were reported previously. Then the totals, similar to the other one, the difference is these tables won't be editable, contrary to the ones that are in the ship page, because but as company, as verifiers, you should verify that these values are the ones that are calculated, and any type of correction that has to be made, you should make it in the reporting tables. So that's it from my side. I hope it helps for the reporting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. I think it's my turn to talk briefly about the transfer of company scenarios. I have a few slides, so I'll get to these. Okay, so compliance obligations following a transfer of a company. So there could be situations when a vessel changes hand and it's being transferred to another company. What is relevant here is Article 15.4 of the regulation. So what the transferring company needs to notify the verifier and do a partial FuelEU report. And this has to be as close as practical to the day of the completion of the transfer, and not later than 1 month thereafter. And the partial FuelEU report needs to be recorded in the FuelEU database, and the verifier, they need to assess this partial FuelEU report. Who is responsible for the verification after a change of a company? It's the company that has the responsibility for the operation of the ship on the 31st of December of the reporting period, shall be responsible for the compliance of the ship with the requirements for the year for the reporting year. So these are the relevant provisions, and we put together here a slide that looks at a scenario that actually Company A was owning the ship. Company A was running the ship, was responsible for the ship under the FuelEU until the 31st of January. And then there's a transfer of company that took place on the 31st of January. So what is happening? What are the relevant rules and obligations here? So Company A, they have to submit a FuelEU report covering the year of reporting period of 25 by the following year, 31st of January. Then the transfer is taking place. Company A also need to do a partial FuelEU report for the first month of the reporting period of 26, because that January report will not be part of the original full FuelEU report. And the verification of this partial FuelEU report and also the main FuelEU report needs to happen by the verifier. There's a verification period given until the 31st of March. And then the flexible mechanisms. and the penalty calculation are taking place, and it will be company B who pays the penalty, and verifier B is responsible for the flexibility mechanisms as well. So company A should only release the ship in THETIS-MRV after the submission of the partial FuelEU report. And also company B, when adding the ship to its fleet, will have to declare the company effective date. So that's how a transfer of the company scenario should take place. And these are the responsibilities of company A and company B in case of a transfer. That's it briefly from my side, and I give back the floor to Mattia again about the compliance balance module and about the flexibility mechanism.
Thank you, José. So for the last presentation, I will give the floor to José Barradas. Peter, if you could stop sharing just to share the presentation. Thank you.
It's your side now. It looks okay.
Thank you very much, Peter, and good morning to all, and thank you for attending the webinar. There were some questions regarding how it will work, the flexibility mechanism. So what we have foreseen for this presentation is quickly going through what we are developing at the moment for the THETIS-MRV, what are our considerations, and how we are foreseeing this model that will give some clarity exactly how the process on the dealing with the compliance balance and the flexibility mechanism foreseen in the regulation will work. There is still ongoing discussions, namely in the SSF subgroup string on calculations that will be proposed, and may be useful to do some refinements to address how to include additional tools to facilitate this process. Just to say that this isn't the final tools that will be implemented in the system. There is some rooms for improvement. However, as we all know, there is a very difficult timeline for the implementation of the functionalities. So I will address a little bit how the workflow will work, or how we are envisaging the workflow for the compliance balance, the flexibility mechanism, and addressing a little bit mainly the workflow for the pooling, because there is several doubts and we have received several questions. So working and looking closer what's happening with the compliance balance. So the first stage of the compliance balance is, as it is foreseen in the Article 16.4, the verifier, after having verified the FuelEU report, will run the calculation to calculate the compliance balance. As it was explained by Mattia, he should take into consideration what has happened in the previous years, namely the banking and the borrowing. So we don't call it just compliance balance of the ends used in the reporting period, but it is the adjusted compliance balance, because it's also taken into consideration what was the compliance balance in the previous years and the banking and borrowing options from the ship. But the compliance balance is created by the verifier because it is under the Article 16.4, and as it is foreseen also in the Article 16.5, the verifier will submit this information to the company. Then the next step, it comes the compliance options, that it's up to the company to decide exactly how the company is addressing the compliance and to define a strategy to be compliant with the FuelEU Maritime. The company can decide to use the flexibility mechanism or can simply decide and report to the verifier that it doesn't want to use flexibility mechanism. If it is, and if the company wants to use the flexibility mechanism, he can do the banking and borrowing or can do the pooling. I will explain a little bit further in the next slide the pooling mechanism, because the pooling mechanism, what it will do, it will freeze for some time the compliance workflow, so we can have a dedicated workflow for the pooling, because there is additional intervenience in the process, namely the other shipping companies from different ships to be included in the pool, and also a dedicated verifier to verify the pooling and the allocation of the surplus in the pool. So when we come to the end of the flexibility mechanisms, the verifier will have to issue before the 1st of May the verified compliance balance for the reporting period. If there is a deficit, the verifier will issue the verified compliance balance, and this will be submitted to the administering state for the administering state to do the calculation of the penalties. If the compliance balance is positive, and we have it included in this workflow because it is a requirement only for 2030, but there is also the issue of non-compliant port calls under the OPS connection, which means that even if there is a compliance balance that is positive, if there is non-compliant port calls, it will be up to the administering state to manage the penalties, issue the document of compliance. But focusing only in the compliance balance, if there is a positive compliance balance, then the verifier will issue the verified compliance balance and issue the document of compliance. Regarding the specific case where there are penalties to be paid, this will be managed by the administering state, and the administering states and the member states will define in their own legislation how this process will be handled by each administering state, and how the companies that were attributed to that administering state will have to do the payment of the penalties. What will happen in the system, as it is foreseen, is that the administering state should foresee this payment, and the company should upload in the system the proof of the payment of the penalties. After this one, the administering state will be able to issue a document of compliance in the system. You will see that there is several loops in the workflows that is foreseen for if there is a mistake in the process. There is also always the possibility for the users to ask and to revise the outcome. It is also for the case where there is additional checks, where there is a need and a necessity to revise the compliance balance, or if there is additional penalties to be paid, calculated by administering state based on the additional checks report. So there is always the need to have the possibility for this process to be revised. Now, going a little bit deeper in the pooling of compliance, like I said, this is in the previous workflow, only a bit of the process, but this will have to be further detailed when we want to create the pooling. So what we are doing and foreseeing in the system is companies will find a contractual agreement to create a pooling. In the system, one of the companies that decided to be included in the pool will go to the system and create the pool with the different ships, regardless if the ship is from their company or not. After creating the pool, they will nominate one verifier that can be one of the verifiers that did the verification of the FuelEU reports, or a different one, but this verifier needs to have a partnership with the company that is creating the pooling. Then this company will submit this draft of the pooling for the other companies, allowing to participate in the pooling in the system. This will then, when this process is finalized, the verifier of the pool will confirm that the pool allocation that is being proposed by the company is following the rules. So the basis for the pooling is the verified compliance balance calculated by the different verifiers, and the pooling verifier, what it needs to do is to confirm that the data that is being introduced corresponds to the different verified compliance balance, and that the allocation that is being proposed is following the rules under the FuelEU Maritime. So if it is following the rules, and if the input data is covered by a verified compliance balance, the pool verifier can say that the pooling is verified as satisfactory, and then this pooling will go back to the previous workflow. So going back to the previous workflow, what you will see here is that when the pool allocation is approved, this will come back and be submitted to the ship verifier so he can continue the process and issue a verified compliance balance that can be positive or negative, or it can follow this workflow to have a document of compliance to be issued. Now, going more a bit on the detail of what we are envisaging for you to see in the process. So what you will be able to see, this image is very similar for what you will have in the My Fleet page and with my in the emissions report. So you will have, and what we are envisaging is a page that it's my compliance balance. I will address this in the final slides just to explain a little bit the process. But what you will get is also this compliance balance report, where you are going to get the data that is being calculated by the verifier, and where you will have the option to use the flexibility mechanisms. So after the calculations done by the verifier, you will get this information, meaning the greenhouse gas intensity of the energy used, and also the compliance balance of the energy used and the adjusted compliance balance. This is the time where the company will be able to choose the strategy for compliance. If it is positive, the company can simply request a banking for the verifier, or if it is a deficit, in the limits of the borrowing, what it is foreseen for the borrowing, it can ask for a borrowing. The option is to follow a pool. Then what the ships that want to participate in the pool should do is allowing for that ship to participate in the pool. And every ship that want to participate in the pool should make that option available. This is to allow other companies to see the compliance balance of that ship. So because it's not foreseen for the compliance balance to be publicly available, it is required for the companies to allow this information to be shared with other companies. So the first step is allowing in the system to be participating in the pool. Then the leading company will come to the button and will create the pool. When creating the pool, they will add ships to the pool. For example, that we can see here, the company tried to add 5 ships. The first 3 ships are available to enter in the pool. This means that the company of these ships went to the system and allowed to participate in the pool, where the last ships, what is happening, one of them is already participating in a pool, and as it is foreseen in FuelEU Maritime, a company cannot participate in more than one compliance balance pool per verification period, and the other one didn't make it available for a pooling. So it's not shared information about the compliance balance, so it cannot participate in that pool. Then you can see the total compliance balance, just to confirm that the total compliance balance is positive, because if it is not positive, the pool cannot follow on, because it is required that the total compliance balance in a pool is positive. There is also the need to allocate a verifier for the pool that has to have a partnership with the company that is creating this pool. What we can see here is the next step, where the company will determine the allocation of the pooling. So what you can see here is not the amount that is going to be transferred between the companies. What you'll see in the system, as it is foreseen in FuelEU Maritime, is the final allocation of the pooling between the ships that is participating in the pool. The next step is this company that is creating will submit to the other companies so they can approve, and in the end, the verifier will do the approval of the pooling, so that then we can continue the workflow of the compliance. So going more in the detail here of what's happening in my compliance balance. So what you will be able to see here in this page is the compliance of the different ships that you have in your fleet. If you are managing the different companies, you will see the different ships of the different companies that you have in your fleet, and the different years of compliance, and what was the process of compliance that you opted in the different years. In the first example, you can see that the option was a deficit followed by a borrowing. In the second row, you will see the same ship in the following year had a credit, and even having an advanced compliance surplus with aggravation, he still managed to be positive, and he decided to do the banking. He didn't enter in the pool. So what you will see here is different option in different years for what was the compliance strategies used by the different ships. This is just for you to have a quick overview how you did the compliance and what is the status of your fleet in terms of the compliance under the FuelEU Maritime. So this was what I had for this presentation. As I said, more details regarding the calculation and different scenarios. We are having several requests to provide clear examples of how the calculations will be made. This is being discussed under the SAP's workstream under the calculations, and it is foreseen that one of the outcomes is a guidance with different examples of calculations coming from the reporting and the calculation of the greenhouse gas intensity till the calculations for the compliance balance. So it is foreseen. We are also participating and assisting that process and contributing to it. And it is expected that in the coming months it will be released guidance on the related to how to do the reporting, how to do the calculations in the different steps of the process of the managing the compliance balance. And this is it. I know that it was a lot of information, but we will also continue with the communication and information to provide more clarity as we go in more in the detail of the process.
Yes, thank you, Jose and Caroline and Maite. Indeed, a lot of information, a lot of slides, and a lot of questions from you. I see 101 questions were submitted through the chat. And I see we managed to answer 28. I think several of us during the presentations were typing in answers. So some of them are responded to, but many others are not. So we will take these questions and do short answers to them and publish them on the EMSA website. For many of these issues, we already have a opinion, a position that has been developed through discussions between MOVE and EMSA, and through discussions with stakeholders as well. Some of them, as Jose also mentioned, we are still working on, most notably under the work streams of the SAPS ESSF. This relates to calculations, but also to the fuel certification systems. So once these discussions are done, we're going to publish the results, but we will also get back to you on these outstanding questions, which are still coming on. Now we are 108 questions, but I think for the moment, for today, maybe we have to leave it like this. This webinar again showed to us that there's a lot of issues that need to be well explained, that need to be given an answer to operators, to shipping companies, to verifiers, about probably all aspects of the compliance process, starting from the monitoring plans to the actual reporting, to the use of pooling mechanisms. So it's a lot of issues where we all need to give you some answers. So this will happen through the new Q&As. This will happen through the results of the work streams, and this will happen through answering the questions that we've been getting from you today. But we have to stop this webinar right now here. So I would like to thank for our presenters from EMSA, for all three of you. And I would like to thank you for coming today and also giving us all the questions about the FuelEU Maritime. We shall consider ourselves what further ways we can communicate to you. So we will consider if further similar webinars will be held at the beginning of 2025. And see how, as you are starting the reporting, as you are starting the registering of voyages, what new questions, what new issues this will throw up to the surface, and we'll be trying our best to stay in communication with you so that the compliance, we are giving you as much help with the compliance as possible. But thank you for today, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.